tuned in to the Andrew Lawton Show.
I do want to speak about the new chapter we are experiencing right now in conservative politics in Canada. We had over the weekend a live show. I was anchoring it alongside my colleagues Sue Ann Levy and Harrison Faulkner. We had Ellie Kenton-Nantel and Jasmine Moulton coming in from Ottawa, and Candace Malcolm joined us from maternity leave, which we were very grateful for. And it was difficult to, in some ways, pretend that there was a little bit of suspense to what was going to happen, because I think everyone knew and has known since February that Pierre Poilievre was going to be the next conservative leader. We didn't know how decisive it was going to be, but we knew it was going to be him. I want to talk about this in a bit more of a broad context here, specifically as it regards the conservative movement in the country. And I want to make clear, we're obviously the Conservative Party of Canada because this party did just elect a leader, but he is a movement conservative, Pierre Poilievre. And that term, I find, often gets lost in the partisan discourse. But remember, it's a lot bigger, the conservative movement with a small c, than the Conservative Party of Canada. Jamil Jivani is the new president of the Canada Strong and Free Network, and we had him on the show just after he was named the president at their big conference in Ottawa a couple of months ago. But he joins me on the line now. Jamil, good to talk to you, sir. Explain to me, I mean, this idea of a conservative movement, I think, is lost on a lot of people. And I don't think in Canada we've always done a good enough job at fostering this. So tell me how that really unfolds from your perspective at the Canada Strong and Free Network, first off.
Yeah, I think you made an excellent point, Andrew, when you said that the conservative movement is bigger than the Conservative Party. And I think that's important for people to realize, is that being a conservative isn't about wearing a certain team jersey or being involved in politics. You know, a lot of people will never work in politics. They'll never run for office. But maybe they vote in different ways. Maybe they don't vote at all, but they can have conservative values. They can have a conservative outlook on the world. And that can be, as you said, cultural stuff. It can be economic. It can be all sorts of different things. You know, there's decades and centuries worth of writing and thinking about what it means to be a conservative. And I'd be hard pressed to summarize that now. But what I would say is that, you know, it is around basic ideas around family, community, small government, pro-business, pro-economic growth, about the idea that people should have the chance to live according to their own values and not have those values infringed upon by a government that wants to sort of force uniformity onto the people. A lot of basic ideas that I think conservatives do agree on, even though we do have lots of disagreements as well. And at the Canada Strong and Free Network, we try to be a place where people can come together across the conservative spectrum, share their ideas, debate ideas, at the end of the day, be a bit of a training ground for the sorts of things that might become reality should, you know, conservatives run governments. You know, we want to be able to produce policy thinking and cultural thinking that might influence the way governments make decisions at some point down the road, whether that's in the short term or the long term. So it's very exciting to be part of the movement, because we welcome you regardless of whether the Conservative Party wins an election or not. We welcome you regardless of whether you like the particular leader of a Conservative Party at a given time. And as you said, the interesting thing about someone like Pierre Poilievre is that he does unite the party and the movement in a way that hasn't been true for some time now. You know, I think under Aaron O'Toole, there was a pretty big gap between the party and the movement on a number of issues. Pierre Poilievre steps in and I think has closed that gap in a way that's really helpful.
Yeah, it's always difficult for anyone to live in the shadow of a predecessor. And I feel bad about holding up Stephen Harper as the benchmark of what an ideal conservative leader should be, because obviously his government wasn't perfect. No government is. But I do think that Pierre Poilievre has tapped into that Harper coalition and even moved beyond it. I mean, the Freedom Convoy Coalition, if I can call it that, or the Anti-Mandate Coalition, which he's really spoken to, is not at all filled with partisan conservatives. And I think that even talking to some of these issues has really helped him move beyond what even Stephen Harper had. Like, I remember I was at a rally of Poilievre's in London, Ontario, And he was doing it at the Best Western Hotel, which is like a big event space in London that has all these conferences. And Jenny Byrne, who was on his campaign and also was integral to the Harper government, she and I were speaking, and she said, like, even when Harper did rallies here, we weren't filling that overflow room that we were for Pierre Poilievre. So to get that many people out in a leadership event for someone compared to like what a sitting prime minister who had a fair amount of star power was able to do, this is something quite significant.
Yeah, and I think it's because Pierre Poilievre has become synonymous with change for people. You know, those crowds come out because they're looking for something new, looking for something different. They want to break away from the Trudeau administration. They want a different way of doing politics, a different way of governing. And Pierre Poilievre represents that. I mean, that is why I think he was able to pick up so much momentum from the trucker convoy, is that the trucker convoy was an expression of a desire for change. People were frustrated with the Trudeau government, and Pierre Poilievre has represented much of the same thing to people. And so, you know, that's something that on the right we have not had in a very long time. You know, that the Conservative Party would be the counterculture party, the party that's challenging people in power, the party that's going to hold, you know, the wealthy to account for creating a system that in many ways is disadvantaging a lot of middle class and working class families. I mean, that is exciting, I think, for conservatives. And that's why he's getting a crowd unlike anything we've seen before, because people are hungry for something different. And now we've got a guy who's actually offering that. And the thing about Pierre too, and this is something that a lot of his critics, including sort of the red Tories, sometimes don't want to acknowledge, but he's also a substantive guy. He's got ideas for policy. He has a vision for how he would govern. And I think being able to back up that demand for change with real tangible ideas, that's going to be a recipe for success, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when Poilievre went on kind of the Bitcoin spree during the leadership race, I know a lot of people were mocking it. And I went to one of his events, which was at like a shawarma place that has been very big into cryptocurrency. And I was talking to a lot of the people there who, again, have never really been political because they're crypto people. So their whole ethos is just like, leave us alone and let us live our lives. And they were getting excited about him. And you could tell when he was talking about Bitcoin that this was like a policy nerd that was really just geeking out on something that mattered to him personally. And I actually kind of like that in politicians, that actually believe something from their personal lives and are importing it. I mean, same as Maxime Bernier in supply management. Like, again, you could tell he believes that and he wants to have his little policy wonk nerd out over it. And I think we need more of that. I'm so tired of politicians that could not summon an independent thought if their life depended on it.
Yeah. Now, look, Andrew, I'm not going to pretend I understand Bitcoin at all. It honestly just goes way over my head. So I can't.
I understand
comment on-
shawarma. I don't understand Bitcoin
Yeah.
either with a lot of,
I could-
so you're not alone there. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, I could definitely do shawarma too. Bitcoin, I'm not as familiar with, but you're right. Like even on things like when he talks about, you know, removing gatekeepers for newcomers to Canada so that they can get a job in the profession they've been trained in. He's got specific policies, right? He's talking about certain waiting periods where people have to be informed whether they can get a job or not. Like he's got some specific ideas. And even on things like housing, he's talked about, you know, withholding certain funding to municipalities unless they're willing to change their zoning laws. You know, these are specific, tangible policy ideas. And I think that, again, I know that his critics, especially his critics who call themselves conservatives, they are going to question, you know, whether he's got the substantive backup on these ideas. But I think the reality is clear. I mean, he has specific policy ideas. And I think as more Canadians hear them, they'll realize that this is not the guy that a lot of the media has made him out to be. He's not consumed by anger. He's not some kind of like caricature of populism. He's a guy who's got real ideas that might make the economy a bit more fair to the average person and make opportunity more available to the average person. And I think that's exactly what Canadians are looking for.
Yeah, it's funny how so many of the attacks from within and without the conservative movement, or I guess not a lot of these are from the conservative movement, but nevertheless, they're all the same no matter who's there. Like QP put out a statement this morning and they were like, you could tell they just dug out their attack on Andrew Scheer and they were trying to find a way to like make it work on Pierre Poilievre. This was a line. It's too bad that unlike Andrew Scheer, Pierre Poilievre does not hold American citizenship because he would be right at home as a governor of a state like Alabama. And it's like, so they had like come up with this like witty attack in 2019, and they didn't get a chance to use it. They're like, let's find out. Okay, if he were American, then he would be like it's. But when people see this, or that cartoon I played earlier from the Toronto Star of like, you know, Aaron O'Toole bundled up in Pierre Poilievre's bondage dungeon, it's like I have to assume that most people will just see that and see the guy with the photogenic family talking about inflation and be like, I don't really see how those two things connect.
You know, first off, it's like they mention Alabama or like the United States, like we're supposed to like hate America. Like it's just so it's weird.
Yeah, we're
that
supposed to all like
not-
Alabama's
yeah,
supposed to be like trigger this Pavlovian response of like, oh yeah, we hate them.
yeah, like I mean, you know, like Martin Luther King marched in Alabama. Like Alabama actually has been home to a lot of people who do good things and fight for good things. Like it's weird to me when they mention America as if we're supposed to be like hating our biggest trade partner in the first place. But nonetheless, to your bigger point, Andrew, I think you're absolutely right. Like this is a game plan, right? This is a playbook we've seen used over and over and over again, which is designed to make you know, basically borrow Democrat talking points that are used to attack Republicans, act somehow like our countries are the exact same, and use the exact same criticisms against Canadian conservatives. It's like, you know, there's not a single Canadian conservative with any record of success in decades who has campaigned against things like universal health care. You don't see it. And yet you would think from listening to people at CUPE or the Toronto Star that there is no difference between Canadian conservatives and Republicans. There are meaningful differences, right? And so they just try to play this game where they import American culture wars and they think Canadians aren't smart enough to see what they're doing. But unfortunately for them, I think a lot of Canadians are smart enough to see what they're doing. And you can't just keep saying things like Trump, 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 and thinking that that's an argument, because that actually doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And the one thing I've always said too is that we know the media attacks and the activist attacks are going to come. And I think that the one big thing, and I sort of view independent media as being essential to this, is ensuring that when a politician does say something that is markedly conservative, that there's a base of support there willing to back them up, because you have to counter that natural instinct that a lot of them have. And we certainly saw in Aaron O'Toole to scurry at the first sign of pushback by saying, actually, no, as Canadians, we do believe that and we do agree with that. And I go back to that conservative movement discussion, and I want to talk to you about this event you have coming up in Red Deer on September 24th. And I'm very privileged to get to be not just speaking, but I'm going to be doing a live broadcast of the Andrew Lawton Show, which I've never actually done before a live audience before. So that's going to be on September 24th in Red Deer. But tell me what this event is, first off.
Well, it is a conference for the movement. And to your point earlier, it's about getting people together outside of the political party to think about what does it mean to be a conservative? What are some of the ideas that conservatives are excited about? And what is the role of the conservative movement in building, as you put it, that base of support for ideas so that conservative politicians know what we expect of them and they can go out and actually act on behalf of the conservative base, of conservative voters, of families that are looking for change in this country right now. So on the 24th in Red Deer, Alberta, we're going to get together and start what I think is going to be a process over the coming months and years of building out a set of ideas for what the next conservative government might actually be held accountable for. What are we expecting of them? What do we want them to do? So I see our conference on the 24th as an opportunity to start that conversation, get some thought leaders together, get some newsmakers together, and start building out that vision for what we believe a conservative future might look like. So, you know, you being there and doing your show live is going to be really exciting. We'll have Andrew Scheer there to kick things off and talk about what he thinks the takeaways and lessons learned from the Poilievre campaign success is. Jason Kenney will be there to give one of his last speeches as Premier of Alberta. And then we'll also have all 6 of the UCP leadership candidates there to talk about their vision for how to, you know, do battle with the NDP when the general election comes in a few months. So there's gonna be a lot of interesting things on the table. And I think it's important for conservatives to build these kind of relationships, to debate ideas, exchange ideas, and importantly, remind ourselves, because so many conservatives, especially young conservatives, tell me all the time, they feel alone on university campuses. They feel like they can't say what they believe in their workplace. They're worried they're going to be ostracized if they're outed as a conservative. And we're trying to, you know, do these sorts of events to remind people you're far from alone. There's tons of people who think like you. There's tons of people who want you to be successful. Come and network with us. Let's build this movement together so we can have each other's backs.
It is a great all-star panel you have, and I'm not including myself in the all-star category. I'm just going to be doing my little bit. And also, by the way, shameless plug, I'll be signing copies of my book, The Freedom Convoy, there. So if you do come and want to hear Andrew Scheer and Jason Kenney and me and the UCP leadership candidate, you can also grab a copy of my book while you're there. But the one thing that I really find to be important about these things, first off, after the last 2.5 years, anything that gets me in the room with normal people is, I think, a very, very good thing. And, we saw a lot of these people in Ottawa at the Canada Strong and Free Network conference back in, I think it was like April or May. The last few months has blended together. But the other thing that I would bring up is that there's always something tangible that I've gotten out of these about, what it is that you can actually do. Because I think a lot of the times, we can talk about policies and talk about ideas, and we can find some common ground, or, strengthen our ability to, sharpen our rhetorical knives and all of that. But when you come out of these things, there's always been something I found, going back to the Manning Center conferences, very tactical about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to recognize that if we want to sort of change the direction of this country, we've got to get active, right? So it's not like the typical networking where you might just collect some business cards and, go for coffee. When we talk about networking at the Canada Strong and Free Network, we're talking about strategizing, game planning, figuring out how we can support one another, figuring out how we can encourage one another. You're right. There is a goal here to be action oriented, and there's no way you could come to one of our conferences and not leave with a sense of where you're needed, because everyone is needed. And I think what we try to do is make the case of the different ways that people can get involved in the movement, the different roles that are out there, the different organizations that are out there, the different issues that we need people to be working on and thinking about. So yeah, anybody listening who'd like to come out, please do check us out. The website is canadastrongandfree.network. You can also hit me up on social media at Jamil Jivani on Instagram, on Twitter, where we post the links to the conference. The early bird ticket prices are still up until the end of the week, so we encourage you to register. And it's really, we're blessed to have people with the kind of vision that you do, Andrew. And I think this is something that's unique about what we do, what you do, as opposed to other political, organizations or movements in the country. I think a lot of conservatives are drawn to the movement for the best reasons, because they really believe in the cause. They want to do something for other people. They want to use their voice for good. And I think, people who feel that way will find a lot of like-minded individuals at conferences like ours.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm honored to have the opportunity to take part. And I actually, apart from like an event I did in Toronto, this is like the first ever book signing I've done, certainly in Alberta. So glad to be there. Hope to see a lot of you who are tuned in there as well. Do come and say hello. Jamil Jivani, president of the Canada Strong and Free Network. We'll see you in Red Deer in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, see you in Red Deer, Andrew. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.